Hi everyone, I hope this finds you doing well. I wanted to show a demo of the latest feature I've added to Illuminated Cloud, specifically support for the new Salesforce Multiframework feature. It's also known as UI bundles. That's the underlying metadata type. And I think a lot of people know it as basically on-platform first-class support for React, and it seems also in the future Angular, Vue, who knows what other frameworks they may decide to support, hence the term multi-framework. It was one of these things that was announced in early access, beta level access was provided at TDX 26, and I think it's generated a lot of excitement. I'm going to be demoing this initially from their own reference project, open source project, Multi-Framework Recipes. I encourage you, if you're starting to explore this, to clone this project and just take a look at the various examples of how to use the Salesforce APIs in conjunction with the React APIs. I think maybe the best place to start is to go into the application level settings. Where we're going to go to the UI Frameworks tab. And if this is not familiar to you, it's because until this build, it's been called LWC. But I've generalized the name because there's a lot of intersection between the things that are configurable for LWC and the things that are configurable for UI bundles, specifically the unit test section, but also some of the other concepts. So this is basically just a rename of the tab and extending it for other UI frameworks. You may also notice this deployment was previously called validation deployment. Just trying to make the best use of horizontal real estate here on this tab set. That was just a very small UX layout type of thing. But let's start in this UI Frameworks tab. The LWC section is mostly unchanged. I did add an option if you wanted to disable LWC local development, which I believe is about to be renamed Live Preview. So there's probably going to be some ripple effect here, even on these labels. But LWC local dev, you can now disable it if you don't want it. And I've moved the option to disable deploy on save of LWC source files when you have a local dev server running. I've moved that from the deployment tab, also known as validation deployment, to be kind of more contextually present for the surrounding feature. The unit test section, which will only be visible if you're using Illuminated Cloud with a free JetBrains 2026.1 or higher IDE, was added recently for Jest support for those using free IDEs. You won't see it if you're in a commercial IDE. And if you're in a free IDE prior to 2026.1, again, I strongly recommend that you go ahead and upgrade to whatever the latest and greatest is and use that, because it gives you free access to JavaScript, TypeScript, CSS, React support, just much better support for those features. And you'll see this section, again, if you're not in a commercial IDE. But you'll see that the options are basically the same, but again, it's been generalized for both Jest and VTest, where VTest is in support of Vite apps, which these UI bundle apps tend to be Vite apps. And all these options basically apply to both testing frameworks, except for the watch type. That's only Jest supports multiple watch types, but everything else is supported for both Jest and VTest. And you'll see in the demo that VTest-based test execution is effectively identical, and I'm going to defer a lot of the details on that to the Jest video I did recently. But the new section here in the middle for UI bundles is obviously in support of this new feature, and but conceptually the options themselves are going to reflect things you've seen before. For example, in LWC TypeScript development, Illuminated Cloud will automatically compile your TypeScript into the corresponding JavaScript for deployment because the server expects JavaScript, not TypeScript. Similarly, these UI bundles need to be built before they're deployed, and so Illuminated Cloud can help to build those before they're deployed. Now, this is a somewhat expensive, computationally or time-wise expensive step, and so Illuminated Cloud gives you the option to do kind of an out-of-date check, a dirty check, before it will actually perform the build. And it does that by comparing the source files of the bundle to the output files of this build, which are under build and dist. And it's looking at last modified timestamp. So if anything in source is newer than the newest thing in build and dist, it's out of date effectively. It's a very simple check, but it's generally an effective check. Now, it's possible that this may not work for you, and if so, you can disable the option, and it'll be unconditionally built on each deployment if you're deploying any content from a UI bundle. But the main reasons that would happen are, of course, if there's a flaw in my logic, which is certainly possible. If so, report it to me and I'll fix that. But the other would be if you're using tools that explicitly set last modified timestamps on files. For example, some version control systems can be configured to set the last modified timestamp of a file. For example, when you revert a file, or when you first pull out a file from version control to the timestamp in version control, which is going to make it not look new relative to the build. And so it's just not going to work if that's the way that things work with some of the tools that you use in your overall project. But for the most part, I'd say start with this enabled, and hopefully you can skip the build step if there's no reason to build. The next one has to do with local dev. Just like LWC, there's a local dev server for these UI bundles. And if you don't want that, you can disable this and you just won't see the context actions to start, restart, and stop those local development servers. I think as you see the demo, you're going to want this. And then just like with LWC, if you're running a local dev server and you do deploy on save of UI bundle files for that running server, you probably want to skip deployment, and because you're focused on working locally. And there's no point in running an expensive build in the background. You can catch that up once you're through doing your local part. But if you don't want to do that, if you want things to deploy all the time whenever you hit Command S or Control S, you can uncheck this and that's fine. Now this other option is something that you probably haven't seen before, and unfortunately it's not something I can add right now for LWC local dev because it is responsible for opening the resulting browser. I've actually reached out to Salesforce about this to see if they can add an option similar to the SF org open command to say basically just output the URL that you would have opened so that I can open it. And if they do that, I'll add the same feature. But Illuminated Cloud is actually responsible for opening the browser here, so it can open it externally just like it normally would have using the IDE's configure default browser. It can open internally in the IDE in basically a full editor tab, or, and this is the default, it can open it internally as a right split. And that again is the default. I think you'll see why as we go through the demo, but it gives you that experience I think most people want, which is you got the source on one side, you have the actual running application on the other, and you can see changes as you make them. So it makes for a very, very fast, very high cadence kind of local development experience. Okay, so that's the configuration. Why don't we dive into the actual demo proper? We'll go ahead and start with tests. As I said earlier, this is going to be largely identical to the Jest demo I did previously, so I'm not going to go very deep on this, but I do just want to show that how it works, especially if I'm in a free IDE, how it works in a free IDE. In a commercial IDE, it's going to be very similar, but it's going to use JetBrains' own support for Jest and VTest in this case. But I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to right-click on a bundle. So testing for VTest takes place in the context of a bundle. I'm going to execute in the context of a bundle. I could just run it directly here by saying for this bundle I want to run all tests, but I'm going to run it with coverage, kind of, two birds with one stone, so we can see two features at once. And again, the test runner is going to look a little different if you're in a free IDE, which I'm showing here, or in a commercial IDE, but the net effect is the same. It's going to go run that context of VTest tests, and if anything fails, you're going to get hyperlinked failures to those tests. You can rerun failed tests, all that. In this case, everything passed. You can see it open coverage because VTest is effectively a derivative of Jest. You're going to get similar types of coverage categories, so line, statement, function, branch. We can go down here to a specific file and take a look, and we can see that green means the whole line is completely covered, red means nothing's covered. If you see yellow, that means that there's branch level logic that was partially executed, and if you click in the gutter over here on the yellow gutter indicator, you can see the individual branches and the hit counts of each. So again, this is all covered in the, no pun intended there, in the Jest demo video. So if you want to see more about how VTest testing works, go take a look at that. The only difference is going to be that you don't have multiple watch types in VTest. So I'll go ahead and just kind of shut this down, and let's take a look real quick at interactive debugging. I'll go ahead and use the navigate to related action, and we can see that just like all other bundles, it gives you a kind of categorical breakdown of related files. So we've got the meta.xml file, we have tests for the original file from which we started this action. We have other bundle files we can move to easily. In this case, I just want to go to the test for this, and we can show how debugging works. Again, debugging is going to be at a per test basis. So you can't do it at a coarser scope than that. So you can't do it at a suite, you can't do it at a file, you can't do it at a directory, at least not right now, just to keep things kind of contained. But I can go over here and bring up context actions and say I want to debug this specific VTest test. And if you're in a free IDE like this, it's going to use a DAP-based debugger. If you're in the commercial JetBrains IDE, it's going to use the JetBrains JavaScript, basically the first class debugger. The experience overall is the same. I'll step over. When we go over container here, you'll see container gets added to the stack, and we can inspect it. We can evaluate expressions. We can change variable values. It is a live debugger, not a log-based debugger. So hopefully that kind of shows you how you can debug your VTest unit tests. So we'll go ahead and let that run. So that's going to be kind of testing. Again, if you want more detail, go look at the other video on Jest, because this is going to be virtually identical. Now let's look at how we can actually deploy this metadata. So this project is set up not source tracked, so you can see that it's bringing up the deploy metadata dialog. We can see that we have all the supporting metadata, some Apex classes that are called indirectly, a custom field, a trusted site, a permission set, and then of course a UI bundle. This is obviously the new metadata type here. This is our React recipes UI bundle that contains this application. And I'm doing a deploy modified metadata. So the first thing that Illuminated Cloud is going to do is its own kind of local versus server out of date check, and then it's checking whether the bundle itself is out of date, and it sees that it's out of date. There have been small changes, so it is actually building the bundle right now using npm run build. If you want to see this, it's all over here in this in the messages tool window. You can see it run. By the way, you may notice that I've improved the messages tool windows so that it actually preserves ANSI based formatting from the run command line output and error, and it additionally uses ANSI based formatting for its own kind of categorical presentation of information. But it got past that build and it deployed successfully. So everything deployed. Now if the build had failed, if you had issues with your config, if you had issues with your source and it wasn't able to compile the source to produce the build, the deployment would have failed fast. The build would have failed fast. You would see the errors, you'd be able to respond to those. Illuminated Cloud doesn't want to allow you to get into a state where you're deploying something that failed to build. So it does have a fail fast mechanism, just like TypeScript, LWC TypeScript does. But you can see that it deployed successfully. We can go take a look at this application in the organization. So let's go ahead and just open the organization, and it'll open in the browser. And we can go into the application, the React recipes application, and we can see this React application running on platform using a combination of React APIs and components and Salesforce APIs, GraphQL, and things like that. So we can go to, for example, read data, and we can see it's doing a live query here, and another live query. We can see it'll do nice debounce type down search with that query. So again, very mature, very nice, very slick React components being used here in conjunction with the Salesforce platform. But of course, the development cycle is going to be pretty slow if you're having to deploy every time you make a change to your React app, and that's where the local dev server comes in. So let's go back over here, and we can start the local dev server. You can start the local dev server by using the context actions from any source file in the bundle. In this case, when I say context actions, I mean using Alt-Enter or on Mac, Opt-Enter. So Alt-Enter on Windows or Linux, Opt-Enter on the Mac. And you can see that I have the option to start the local dev server. You can also do it from the context menu of any bundle file, but I find it to be quite a bit more efficient just to do it from the context actions menu. So I'm going to go ahead and start it, and you can see it's running the right command to start it. Now we could click on this link; it would open it in an external browser, but of course we configured it to open in a right side split in the actual IDE, and so you can see we have the app right here. And let's go to the hello portion, and that's going to match this hello world right here that I just double clicked on to maximize, and we can show just how quickly how quickly our changes are seen in the app. So I'm just going to go say hello demo, and I'm going to hit Control S, and we see it immediately. I'm going to revert that, and we can see the change immediately. So obviously going to be a very highly responsive, high cadence development experience here. Now there may be changes that do require you to restart the local dev server. In that case, you can just go ahead and bring up the context actions again, and you can see that you can restart or stop the local dev server right here. And because we've told it to open internally, it's just going to go and refresh that browser internally. If you did configure it to open externally, it would open in a new tab in that browser, just like it did with LWC local dev. But I mean, this is effectively how the local dev experience works. And again, it is taking advantage of your local project source, but just to be clear, it is working against your organization. So for example, we can go back over here, and I can say type down filtering there, and we can see that it's actually querying the organization that the project's connected to. So it is live against the organization. It's just a matter of what source is being served up in this browser in order to actually show the application. So again, the local dev server, I think this is going to be just an absolutely fantastic development experience. Okay, so now let's take a look at how you can create your own UI bundles and get started on your own instead of starting with, a reference application. So this is an empty application, and what I'm going to do is just go over here and say that I want to create a new UI bundle. I'm going to do type down, but you can see that it's down here, UI bundle, and it's going to bring up a dialog, and I have to put in a symbolic name. We'll just call this demo, and I have to choose one of the templates. Right now the two templates are default, which is effectively just a very skeletal empty UI bundle, and React Basic, which is again skeletal, but it does know about the React, it knows it's a React app, lays that down, and knows about the React Salesforce platform binding. So that is going to be, again, an overloaded term. That is going to be the default selection when you come in here versus, say, the one called default. But it will remember the last template you used, and as new templates are introduced, whether they're new React templates or as they add support for other frameworks, I'll update Illuminated Cloud. I'll talk more about how Illuminated Cloud tracks this feature from beta to GA, and of course post GA at the end of the demo. But so you need to choose a template, and then unless you have a good reason not to, you want to just let it run npm install to install the dependencies for the newly created bundle after it's been created. So we're just going to hit enter, and we can see it's using the CLI to create the bundle. We'll see that. Okay, it just got created. Now it's running npm install to install the bundle's dependencies, and when that gets done, it's going to need to go out and of course index, because it just added a whole lot of libraries and things like that. And once the indexing's done, we'll be able to go out and begin working with this brand new bundle. So let's take a look, and we should be able to see it. Start indexing here, and we can see that we have, in addition to the bundle that was created, we have our node modules for our dependencies. We can go ahead and close this npm install window now, and now that it's finished that, we can go ahead and deploy to the organization. This is a source track scratch org I'm deploying to. Of course, it needs to build the bundle because I just created it, and it's using source tracking to deploy it, so it's deploying it. While it's deploying, why don't we go ahead and take a look at what it means to start the local dev server here. So I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to run demo local dev server, and we'll go ahead and have this start, and there it is. So we have a local dev server running here for demo, and why don't we take a look at the source file associated with this. So we'll go into source pages, and this is the home page. I'm going to go ahead and just split this right over here, and we can again see how quickly we can make a change here. I'll just call this demo, save. We see that instantaneously. Revert that, save. We can see it instantaneously. So just like that, we are working in a local React based application that is a starting point for whatever it is that we want to do. We can also see that our push went successfully, so now this brand new component is also built and deployed to the organization. So that's how you can work with this kind of brand new in your own projects. So that's really it. That's what I wanted to show. Hopefully that that covers the features, the configuration, deployment, local dev, everything you need to know in order to be able to begin working with this. As I said when I started, this is a beta level feature from Salesforce. So transitively, it's a beta level feature in Illuminated Cloud. I mean, I pretty much have to take the kind of maturity level of the thing that is being integrated. But as this tracks towards GA, whatever changes that come in, whatever enhancements that come in, some of them may be breaking changes, I'll update Illuminated Cloud Zone integration accordingly. And then, of course, beyond GA, as support for other frameworks is added, as other templates are added, new features, I'll incorporate those into Illuminated Cloud as well. If you see any issues, you feel free to let me know about them. If they're very clearly issues with the Salesforce side of things, I'd suggest reporting those to Salesforce. If they're very clearly issues with the Illuminated Cloud side of things, report them to me. If you're not sure, report them to me. I'm glad to help you kind of triage whatever's going on and determine whether it's an Illuminated Cloud issue or a Salesforce issue, and if it's a Salesforce issue, to work with you to get it reported to the right people within Salesforce, so that assuming it's something that can be fixed and should be fixed, that it gets fixed. If you have suggestions for improvements, whether that's efficiencies or UX or whatever it happens to be, send them over. I mean, I always want to make it as efficient and as pleasant to use as possible. So let me know about your suggestions. Otherwise, have fun with this. I think this is pretty amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. I think this opens up the Salesforce platform to just an army of folks out there that are already familiar with React, and in time potentially with other frameworks, and allows them to come to the platform and begin working with it almost immediately. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time, and take care. Bye.